21 to 12 o'clock. It's time now to talk numbers. We've been waiting for these GDP figures. Devin, good morning to you. Not good news.
No, it's not, Dan. And, you know, everyone's talking about this 10 million people that are out of work in this country and what do we need to get them employed. Is you need a country that's growing. But let's just take a look to see. The country's economy is failing to gain contraction and traction. It's contracted by 0.6% between July and September this year. That's the Statistics South Africa release earlier today, just moments ago, in fact. And as I said, stirring more concerns that the economy is just too weak to change the fortunes of those 10 million South Africans who are out of work. Latest figure for quarter 3, minus 0.6%, which means there was a contraction. That forecast still sitting at 0.5%. The expected growth rate for the year, as I said, is 0.5%. But here's the dilemma for this country. We have a population growth rate in South Africa at 1.5%. And unfortunately, the economy is only growing, as far as forecasts are concerned, at 0.5%. Now, try and find jobs in this scenario. It would be very difficult. Let's take a look in context what it means for South Africa. While the rest of Africa is expected to grow above 2%, or 2.6% in this case, if you eliminate Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, that growth rate for Africa is about 4%. And look at the difference as far as South Africa's forecast growth is concerned. Just 0.5%. Load shedding, strikes, insufficient investments and weak demand saw the economy shrinking by 3.1% in the first 3 months of the year. It then rebounds to 3.1% in the second. But then, of course, we get this dismal figure coming out today. The danger, as economists have been saying, is that our population, of course, has just been growing too fast to actually absorb labor, much needed labor. Well, political economist Sia Baneza joins me now for more on this. Sia, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, it was expected, but at 0.6%, it just leaves hope for job creation in this country very bleak.
Yes, definitely. And I think if we are to reach the projected 0.5%, that means that in the coming quarter, the fourth quarter, which ends now in December, we need to achieve at least 1.1% growth. And already, that's a projection that's below last year's annual figure of 0.8%. So quite a dire condition. But I'm more concerned in what this means now for policy. Yeah. Because you might remember that given the ratings decisions that happened this year, there's been a continuing talk that government needs to cut. And if you saw the MTBPS pronouncement by our Minister of Finance, there are concerted efforts to continue cutting on the budget side. So what this means is that government, at least on the fiscal side, can't support growth or try and push up growth. And we still also need to deal with the challenges at Eskom, given that this season is seeing quite a significant increase in terms of load shedding, which is continuing or will expected to affect our exports. And so it's very difficult to see where the growth is going to come from to reach the projections.
How much of this is a political problem?
I would say a significant portion. I would say, well, in South African context, you can't really avoid the political question. Yeah. The reason we're in this mess is primarily, in my view, a result of inequality. Inequality, obviously, that results as a legacy of apartheid. Okay, fast forward to where we are now. We're still facing some of those challenges in terms of getting people out of poverty and dealing with the transformational challenge. But more importantly, we're seeing that there's a disconnect in terms of how is policy supposed to deal with this. Government is caught in a debt spiral. They have to cut in terms of spending. But in the kind of context we're in economically, the first decision and the first response of a government would be to raise spending in order to boost aggregate demand. But that's not a policy option that's available. In terms of the monetary policy side, it doesn't seem that there's also very concerted coordination in order to at least support exports so that we can revive our growth figures. So, yes, a large percentage of this is political, but by and large now it's becoming a policy incoherence problem.
And the problem with policy, because you bump into any economist or analyst, I mean, the Reserve Bank governor himself has said, the cheapest form of stimulus is confidence. And the problem is that although we've seen these investment conferences promising to put up the factories, create the jobs, it's not as a large scale as we want it to be, because they're afraid, among other things, that this policy you talk about, no one's going to put up a factory if they have got land issues on their side. That's a bit sort of unnerving. And then, of course, you've got a government who seemingly cannot handle the problem of state-owned enterprises. So confidence, although business might have the money, it's just not there, and they don't want to fill it into the economy.
Definitely, and I would actually push back a little bit in terms of the comments by our Reserve Bank governor in terms of the only solution being confidence. I definitely agree that that's part of the formula, but in the current context, in terms of global uncertainty, there's still the uncertainty regarding the outcome of the US-China trade war, how that's going to fare in terms of commodities, which has a very direct impact for African economies primarily. And so in spite of this, that the fact is, even if we are to resuscitate confidence, the uncertainty in the global economy and the search for yield is making investors quite jittery and panicky. And so in any event, they're unlikely to make long-term decisions at this point, given the major uncertainties globally, which have a direct impact on the African economy.
I'd like to know, for those 10 million people that are out of work, that need an economy that's expanding, not contracting as we see, what do we tell them? I mean, are there low-hanging fruit that both government and business can do to sort of dent that unemployment number?
I definitely think that there's, at this point, given our hands being tied in terms of fiscal policy, we can't increase growth because we're going into a debt spiral. The only opportunity that exists is through public-private partnerships. I welcome, obviously, announcements that have been made repeatedly in terms of the government presidential infrastructure fund. That is definitely going to have an impact. But, other things in terms of how we resolve the state-owned enterprise problems, if you take a leaf from the SAA book, for example, in this touted merger with Ethiopian Air, I think those are some of the low-hanging fruits that will allow us to then deal with the leakages at the state-owned enterprise level, but also increase our productivity there, so that we can actually allow government, in terms of the public sector more broadly, to contribute towards a revival of growth. And, given the current constraints fiscally, we can't really rely on government spending to increase and save the economy. And so we need to have a public-private partnership moving forward.
Well, and just finally, I mean, that's part of the structural reforms that business and investors want to see. What's your take, finally, on what happened yesterday? We've seen the Competition Commission come out saying that, look, guys, data costs have to come down. We know it's a pivotal factor in growing this economy, the need for cheaper, affordable data so that businesses can get off the ground. Do you think that was a sort of a positive way forward you saw yesterday? You'd have different views on that.
Definitely. I think I very much commend the work of Minister Patel and the Competition Commission that have done, and in the amount of inquiries that they're taking into consideration, the medical inquiry included. I think that if the ANC-led government is going to be serious about dealing with the problems of inequality, trying to revive growth, we need to deal with issues of competition in the economy. The economy is far too formalized. A difference between the South African economy and the rest of the African continent is that there's a large informal sector that's also supported by government, which allows people to earn an income in spite of not having a job. And I think by dealing with competition and the small space for competition and trying to find a way to reduce the burden on consumers is definitely a way that we're seeing some reprieve that could allow growth to take place. However, we cannot keep our eyes away from the structural changes, but I definitely welcome some of the changes in terms of dealing with the competition bottlenecks in order to resuscitate the growth.
All right, we'll leave it there. Political economist Siyabaniza there. Thanks.